Hello everyone, I Sania, faculty of BCA department from Tecnia Institute of Advanced Studies. Today I am going to represent a lecture on input-output interface. Let's start now. Input-output interface provides a method for transferring information between internal storage and external input-output devices. Peripherals connected to a computer need special communication links for interfacing them with the purpose of communication. Link is to resolve the difference that exists between the central computer and each peripheral devices. The major differences are peripheral devices are electromechanical and electromagnetic devices, and CPU and memory are electronic devices. Therefore, a conversion of signal values may be needed. Second point, the data transfer rate of peripheral is usually slower than the transfer rate of CPU, and consequently, a synchronization mechanism may be needed. Third, data codes and formats in peripheral devices differ from the word format in the CPU and memory. Fourth, the operating modes of peripherals are different from each other and must be controlled so as not to disturb the operation of other peripheral connected to the CPU. To resolve these differences, computer systems include special hardware component between the CPU and peripherals to supervises and synchronizes all inputs and out transfers. These components are called interface unit because the interface between the processor bus and the peripheral devices. Next is input-output interface module. Input-output bus and interface module, it defines the typical link between the processor and several peripherals. The input-output bus consists of data lines, address lines and control lines. The input-output bus from the processor is attached to all peripherals interface. To communicate with a particular device, the processor places a device address on the address lines. Each interface decodes the address and control received from the input-output bus, interprets them for peripherals and provides signals for the peripherals control. It is also synchronizes the data flow and supervises the transfer between peripheral and processor. Each peripheral has its own controller. For example, the printer controller controls the paper motion, the print timing. The control lines are referred as input-output command. The commands are as following. Control commands. A control command is issued to activate the peripheral and to inform it what to do. Status command. Status command is used to test various status conditions in the interface and the peripheral. Third is data output command. A data output command causes the interface to respond by transferring data from the bus into one of its registers. Data input commands. The data input command is the opposite of the data output. In this case, the interface receives an item of data from the peripheral and places it in its buffer register. Next is input-output versus memory bus. To communicate with input-output, the processor must communicate with the memory unit. Like the input-output bus and the memory bus contain data, address and read-write control lines. There are three ways that computer buses can be used to communicate with memory and input-output. First is use two separate buses, one for memory and other for input-output. Second is use one common bus for both memory and input-output but separate control lines for each. Third, Use one common bus for memory and input-output with common control lines. Input-output processor. In the first method, the computer has independent set of data, address and control buses, one for accessing memory and other for input-output. This is done in computer that provides a separate input-output processor that is called IOP. The purpose of IOP is to provide an independent pathway for the transfer of information between external devices and internal memory. Next is input-output bus and memory bus. Functions of buses. Memory bus is for information transfer between CPU and memory. Input-output bus is for memory transfer between CPU and input-output device through their input-output interface. Many computers use a common single bus system for both memory and input-output interface unit. Use one common bus but separate control lines for each function. Use one common bus with one common control lines for both function. Some common system use two separate buses, one for communicate with the memory and other for the input-output interface. Communication between CPU and all interface unit is via a common input-output bus. An interface connected to a peripheral device may have a number of data register, a control register and a status register. A command is passed to the peripheral by sending to the appropriate interface register. Function code and sense lines are not needed means transfer of data, control and status information is always via the common input-output bus. Next is input-output interface. The method that is used to transfer information between internal storage and external input-output devices is known as input-output interface. The CPU is interfaced using special communication links by the peripheral connected to any computer system. These communication links are used to resolve the differences between CPU and peripheral. There exists special hardware component between CPU and peripheral to supervise and synchronize all the input and output transfer that is called interface units. I hope you understand the topic of input-output interface. Like, share and subscribe Tecnia TV. Thank you so much.